Nobody expected it to go this far. What began as an everyday disagreement, another father and son clash, something private, something routine, turned into a spectacle that shook the internet within seconds. What could have been a simple family disagreement instead became a public event that people couldn't stop replaying, analyzing, and debating. And at the center of it all was King Harris stepping out from the shadow of his father, T.I., in a way nobody anticipated. This wasn't a small moment. It wasn't a fleeting comment or an easily dismissible post. This was a full-scale exposure, a pouring out of experiences, frustrations, and truths that had long been contained behind closed doors. The first spark that ignited the fire, according to circulating accounts, was a physical moment. During one heated exchange, King allegedly got smacked after mentioning one person in particular, 50 Cent. That alone could have sparked controversy, but what happened next turned the situation into something much bigger. Instead of retreating, King pushed forward. He didn't shrink back from the confrontation. He came back louder, angrier, and more direct than ever. He started revealing stories, family moments, and personal insights that had never been intended for public consumption. The internet erupted. People everywhere started asking the same question over and over again. What really happened inside the Harris household? If even a fraction of King's claims are accurate, then this was never just a typical father-son disagreement. It was a larger, deeply rooted conflict that had been building for years. What made this situation even more complex was its underlying themes: control, image, and the pressures of legacy. According to multiple insiders, this wasn't only about a single comment or a slap. It was about years of tension, about a young man grappling with the constraints of living under the gaze of one of hip-hop's most influential figures. Every moment King had held back, every time he felt unseen, unheard, or constrained, accumulated. The physical moment, as shocking as it was, became the catalyst for years of suppressed frustration. Once that trigger went off, everything started unraveling. The revelations that followed didn't just create drama, they threatened to reshape public perception, personal relationships, and even legacies. To understand why this struck so hard, you have to look at the context. King Harris didn't grow up in an ordinary household. T.I. wasn't just a father, he was a public figure, an icon who built a persona around discipline, wisdom, and leadership. Growing up in that environment came with immense expectations. King wasn't just a son, he was a symbol of the family brand, the next generation of a legacy built on careful image management, professional success, and public scrutiny. Every action, every statement, every misstep carried weight. And the weight wasn't light. From an early age, King had to navigate expectations that many teens could never understand. Pressure to represent the family name perfectly. Pressure to act according to an image carefully curated over decades. Pressure to never embarrass the brand, never contradict the public persona of his father, and never expose vulnerabilities in a world quick to judge. Over time, those pressures built layers of tension. Observers could see it in interviews, subtle comments, and behavior that seemed slightly out of alignment with the polished image T.I. projected. At first, it might have been dismissed as teenage rebellion or youthful impatience, but King didn't grow out of it. He became more vocal, more assertive, and more determined to establish his own identity. And that's where the friction deepened. This was no longer simply a father guiding a son. It became a collision of two strong personalities. T.I., seasoned, disciplined, and commanding, versus King, growing in confidence, carving out his voice, and asserting independence. Their clash, already simmering, had been amplified by years of observation, learning, and restraint. King had witnessed conflicts behind the scenes, public dynamics, and interpersonal tensions, especially those involving other industry figures like 50 Cent. Over time, those observations shaped King's perspective. He developed strong opinions about how situations were handled, about differences between public perception and private reality, and about the limits of control. Adding 50 Cent into the mix made the situation even more combustible. Anyone familiar with 50 Cent knows he doesn't stay quiet. He reacts, comments, and throws shots, sometimes in jest, sometimes with serious intent. Over the years, 50 Cent and T.I. had exchanged moments of subtle tension. Nothing explosive at first, but the energy was there, simmering, waiting for a spark. King, watching all of this unfold, had front row access to the dynamic between the two men. He observed what was said publicly, what was left unsaid, and how his father navigated the pressure of industry expectations. That knowledge, combined with years of personal restraint, made the eventual confrontation inevitable. When King allegedly got smacked after mentioning 50 Cent, it was more than a physical reaction. It was the breaking point of years of pressure, restraint, and frustration. King didn't retreat. He responded in kind, unleashing revelations that reshaped how people viewed his father, his family, and their private dynamics. What King shared wasn't superficial gossip. It painted a layered, nuanced picture of the Harris household, struggles with control, the pressures of maintaining image, and the moments when the public persona didn't align with the private reality. The internet's reaction was immediate, explosive, and divided. Some defended T.I., suggesting that parenting is hard, that King was acting out, or that the private details shouldn't be judged publicly. Others supported King, praising him for speaking his truth after years of growing up in the shadow of a powerful, influential father. The mixture of shock, disbelief, and intrigue created a perfect storm online. Clips, reactions, comment threads, and viral posts spread like wildfire, each person trying to interpret the story through their own lens. What made this moment resonate beyond the drama was its universality. Father-son relationships are complicated enough without fame, wealth, and public scrutiny. When one generation builds identity around control, authority, and strength, and the next generation seeks independence, conflict is almost inevitable. In this case, the conflict played out live, in front of a global audience. The stakes weren't just personal. They were cultural, familial, and symbolic of a broader conversation about legacy, authority, and generational change. King's revelations challenged the narrative T.I. had cultivated. The man often seen as the wise, disciplined mentor was now being reevaluated in light of private dynamics. Fans and critics alike were forced to reconcile the polished public image with the messier, more human reality. The unfolding drama highlighted the complexity of life in the public eye, how fame magnifies tension, how pressure shapes behavior, and how family dynamics can become a public spectacle when the private becomes visible. By coming forward, King wasn't merely airing grievances. He was asserting autonomy, demanding that his voice be heard, and revealing the hidden dimensions of growing up under extraordinary circumstances. He reminded the world that children of public figures inherit not just names and privileges, but also scrutiny, expectations, and responsibility. And while T.I. remains a figure of respect and influence, this moment revealed that even icons face challenges when private realities clash with public perception. Story continues to unfold. Analysts, fans, and observers debate every clip, every comment, every subtle nuance. Questions linger. Was this confrontation inevitable? Could it have been avoided? What does it mean for the future of the Harris family, for King's identity, and for T.I.'s legacy? One thing is certain: the event transcended a simple father-son disagreement. It became a cultural touchpoint, a conversation starter, and a lesson in the complexities of fame, family, and power. No matter what happens next, this incident will be remembered as a turning point. It exposed hidden dynamics, tested relationships, and forced reflection on how authority, image, and individuality collide. For King, it was a declaration of independence. For T.I., it was a reminder that leadership, even within your own household, requires balance, awareness, and adaptability. And for the world watching, it was a rare glimpse into the tensions, pressures, and humanity that lie behind the carefully curated images of celebrity life. The story is far from over. King Harris has spoken, the internet has reacted, and the private world of the Harris family has been irrevocably altered. As more details emerge and perspectives shift, one undeniable truth remains. This wasn't just another viral moment. It was a window into the complex, often messy reality of father-son relationships under the brightest spotlight, and it left everyone watching with a newfound understanding of what it means to grow, to challenge, and to finally speak your truth. The public image matches the private reality. They also raise questions about loyalty, respect, and what happens when a child no longer wants to be an extension of their parent's brand. As the story continues to unfold, the internet remains fixated on every new detail. Old interviews are being re-examined. Old posts are being resurfaced. People are trying to piece together the timeline and figure out exactly what led to that physical moment and the explosive aftermath. The bigger question hanging over everything is whether this is a temporary family blow-up that will eventually be resolved behind closed doors, or whether it marks a permanent shift in the relationship between King Harris and T.I. right now. The public only has fragments: King's angry revelations, the initial smack allegation, and the stunned reactions from fans and observers. The full story is still emerging. What is already clear is that this situation has gone far beyond a simple argument. It has exposed cracks in one of hip-hop's most visible family dynamics. It has forced conversations about generational differences, the pressure of fame on children, and the difficulty of maintaining control when the next generation demands to be heard on their own terms. King Harris stepping out and speaking his truth has changed the conversation. Whether people agree with his method or not, the fact that he refused to stay silent has made it impossible for the issues to be swept under the rug. The internet is watching, analyzing, and waiting to see what happens next. Because once private family pain becomes public, there is no easy way to put it back in the box. The revelations have already damaged the carefully crafted image. The only question left is how much more will come out, and whether father and son can find a way to repair what has been broken, or whether this moment will permanently redefine their relationship in the eyes of the world. For now, the internet remains divided, the family remains in the spotlight, and the story continues to unfold in real time. What started as a heated exchange has become something much larger, a very public reckoning with legacy, control, and the complicated bond between a famous father and his outspoken son. Before this whole situation exploded into public view, there were already subtle moments that hinted something wasn't right beneath the surface. Clips of tense arguments surfaced online, awkward exchanges caught on camera, and instances where T.I. had to correct or redirect King Harris in front of others. While some viewers saw these as typical parenting, others began asking a deeper question. Why does this feel different? It didn't come across as ordinary father-son friction. It felt layered, as if things were being said without being spoken aloud, as if long-standing issues were simmering just below the surface. Then social media entered the picture and everything became amplified. Every look, every word, every micro-reaction was dissected and shared instantly. What might have remained a private family matter in the past now played out in public within seconds. That was exactly what happened here. By the time the alleged smack occurred, the tension wasn't new or sudden. It had been building steadily, waiting for the right spark to set it off. That moment became the spark. But here's what many people didn't fully understand at the time. It wasn't the beginning of the conflict. It was the breaking point, the visible result of everything that had been accumulating behind the scenes for years. Once that line was crossed, King Harris didn't just react with raw emotion. He responded with something deeper, something that made it crystal clear this wasn't only about what happened in that single instant. It was about everything that had led up to it. The moment it happened, everything changed. There was no warning, no slow build-up, just a split-second incident that transformed simmering tension into something explosive. According to what is circulating online, King Harris said something about 50 Cent, and that's when the situation crossed a line. Nobody fully agrees on the exact words spoken. Some call it disrespect. Others insist it was simply an honest opinion. but everyone agrees on what followed. Things allegedly got physical, and the internet became convinced that T.I. smacked him. Whether the details match exactly how people are describing them is still debated, but the reaction was immediate and visceral. Clips spread rapidly. Voices were raised. People reacted in real time as if they couldn't believe what they were witnessing, because this was no longer a private family disagreement. It had become painfully public, and the energy shifted in an instant. Instead of backing down or letting the moment pass, King snapped back, not physically but verbally, and what he said next changed everything. He didn't just argue. He began revealing things right there in the heat of the moment, personal details that felt too intimate to be aired publicly. Comments that made viewers pause and think, wait, did he really just say that? He called out certain behaviors, hinted at patterns that didn't match the polished public image of T.I., and suggested that what the world sees is not the full story. You could hear the weight in his voice. This wasn't fresh anger from a single incident. This was built-up frustration, years of it finally breaking free. As the clip spread like wildfire, people started analyzing more than just the words. They examined how T.I. reacted. For the first time, some fans noticed something different in him, less composed, less calculated, more visibly emotional. That threw people off because T.I. is known for maintaining control, for being strategic and always aware of how he presents himself. In this moment, that famous composure appeared to slip. Once viewers saw that crack, the questions multiplied. What pushed things this far? What was really said before the cameras rolled? What has been happening behind closed doors all this time? The situation escalated even further after that initial moment. King didn't go silent or retreat. He went online and doubled down. He posted, spoke out, and reacted in ways that kept the fire burning. In those posts and statements, he began hinting at deeper issues, how he had been treated, things that happened in private, and small pieces of information that didn't explain everything, but added just enough fuel to keep the public locked in and speculating. The internet was no longer reacting to a single heated moment. It was trying to decode an entire hidden story. The more people watched and reread the posts, the more it felt deliberate. It seemed as though King had been waiting for the right moment to finally release what he had been holding inside for years. When that moment arrived, he didn't hesitate. One detail that started circulating quietly at first, then louder, shifted the narrative dramatically. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Again, there is no official confirmation, but multiple people began saying the same thing. This isn't new. That single realization turned everything upside down. The conversation was no longer about one isolated incident. It became about a possible pattern. And once people start thinking in terms of patterns, everything gets re-examined. Old clips, old interviews, and old family moments that once seemed insignificant now feel loaded with meaning, like hidden clues waiting to be interpreted. Just when it seemed the chaos couldn't intensify, King hinted at something nobody saw coming. He suggested that the trigger involving 50 Cent wasn't simply about disrespect. There was something deeper behind the reaction, something that hadn't been fully explained yet. If that's true, then the smack, the argument, and the public explosion were only the surface level. What King was about to reveal next had the potential to completely change how people viewed the entire situation. After the initial posts and viral clips, after the internet had already chosen sides, King Harris took it even further. He went live with no warning, no filters, and no intention of holding back. The energy was completely different this time. This wasn't raw, impulsive anger anymore. It was calculated frustration, the kind that builds when someone has been carrying a heavy weight in silence for far too long. The first thing he said sent shockwaves across social media. "I'm done protecting people who don't protect me." That single line alone carried enormous weight because it felt like a deliberate decision, a conscious choice to stop shielding others at the expense of his own truth. Then he started talking. Not in exhaustive detail, but with enough clarity and emotion to make the stakes feel real. He touched on expectations, control, image, and the pressure of growing up as the son of a larger-than-life figure. He suggested that the public narrative of a strong, unified family sometimes clashed with the private reality he experienced. Viewers could sense the years of accumulated tension in his delivery. This wasn't a teenager rebelling for attention. It felt like a young man who had reached his limit and decided the cost of silence was now higher than the cost of speaking out. The live session didn't resolve anything, but it opened the floodgates. More questions poured in. More old moments were revisited. More people began wondering how much of the Harris family dynamic had been carefully curated for the cameras versus what actually happened when the cameras stopped rolling. The situation has now moved far beyond a simple father-son argument. It has become a very public examination of legacy, control, generational expectations, and the heavy burden placed on children who grow up in the spotlight. T.I. built his career and his public persona around themes of discipline, leadership, and family strength. King's revelations directly challenge pieces of that image, forcing fans, critics, and the broader culture to reconsider what they thought they knew. At the same time, the involvement of 50 Cent adds another complicated layer. Long-standing tension between T.I. and 50 Cent has been part of hip-hop lore for years. When King referenced him, even indirectly, it tapped into that larger rivalry and brought it crashing into the family sphere. The fact that mentioning one name could trigger such a strong reaction suggests the issues run deeper than surface-level disrespect. As the story continues to unfold, the internet remains fixated on every new detail. Supporters of King praise his courage for speaking his truth. Defenders of T.I. argue that parenting is messy and that airing private matters publicly only makes things worse. Many are simply stunned that a family conflict has played out so openly and so dramatically. Just when it seemed the chaos couldn't intensify, King hinted at something nobody saw coming. He suggested that the trigger involving 50 Cent wasn't simply about disrespect. There was something deeper behind the reaction, something that hadn't been fully explained yet. If that's true, then the smack, the argument, and the public explosion were only the surface level. What King was about to reveal next had the potential to completely change how people viewed the entire situation. After the initial posts and viral clips, after the internet had already chosen sides, King Harris took it even further. He went live with no warning, no filters, and no intention of holding back. The energy was completely different this time. This wasn't raw, impulsive anger anymore. It was calculated frustration, the kind that builds when someone has been carrying a heavy weight in silence for far too long. The first thing he said sent shockwaves across social media. "I'm done protecting people who don't protect me." That single line alone carried enormous weight because it felt like a deliberate decision, a conscious choice to stop shielding others at the expense of his own truth. Then he started talking, not in exhaustive detail, but with enough clarity and emotion to make the stakes feel real. He touched on expectations, control, image, and the pressure of growing up as the son of a larger-than-life figure. He suggested that the public narrative of a strong, unified family sometimes clashed with the private reality he experienced. Viewers could sense the years of accumulated tension in his delivery. This wasn't a teenager rebelling for attention. It felt like a young man who had reached his limit and decided the cost of silence was now higher than the cost of speaking out. The live session didn't resolve anything, but it opened the floodgates. More questions poured in. More old moments were revisited. More people began wondering how much of the Harris family dynamic had been carefully curated for the cameras versus what actually happened when the cameras stopped rolling. The situation has now moved far beyond a simple father-son argument. It has become a very public examination of legacy, control, generational expectations, and the heavy burden placed on children who grow up in the spotlight. T.I. has built his career on themes of discipline, leadership, and family strength. King's revelations directly challenge pieces of that carefully constructed image. Whether people agree with King's method or not, the act of speaking out has made it impossible to simply sweep the issues under the rug. The internet is now watching every development, analyzing every new detail, and waiting to see how T.I. will respond, if he responds at all. The involvement of 50 Cent adds another complicated layer. Long-standing tension between T.I. and 50 Cent has been part of hip-hop lore for years. When King referenced him, even indirectly, it tapped into that larger rivalry and brought it crashing into the family sphere. The fact that mentioning one name could trigger such a strong reaction suggests the issues run deeper than surface-level disrespect. As the story continues to unfold, the internet remains fixated on every new detail. Supporters of King praise his courage for speaking his truth. Defenders of T.I. argue that parenting is messy and that airing private matters publicly only makes things worse. Many are simply stunned that a family conflict has played out so openly and so dramatically. What makes this moment particularly powerful is how relatable the underlying themes are, even amid the celebrity context. Every family has unspoken tensions. Every parent and child eventually reaches a point where expectations clash with reality. When those clashes happen under the glare of constant public scrutiny, the results can be explosive. King Harris stepping forward has forced a conversation about whether children of famous parents have the right to define their own stories, even when those stories complicate the family brand. For now, the full picture is still emerging. King has drawn a line in the sand. T.I. has remained largely silent in public, leaving room for speculation about how he will respond. The internet has picked sides, analyzed every second of footage, and turned old interviews into evidence. But beneath the noise lies a very human story, a son demanding to be seen as more than an extension of his father's legacy, and a father whose carefully constructed image is now under intense pressure. At this stage, the story isn't slowing down, it's accelerating. King Harris shows no signs of stepping back. Every clip, every post, every new rumor seems to add fuel to the fire, keeping the world watching with bated breath. Meanwhile, T.I. has largely remained silent, a quiet that only magnifies speculation. That silence is loud in a space where every move is scrutinized, and it gives observers endless room to wonder. What will happen next? Who will speak? And who is holding back critical pieces of the story? What started as a single disagreement, a heated argument between father and son, has evolved into something far more complex. It's no longer just about whether King was disrespected or whether a physical moment, like that alleged slap, occurred. This is about legacy, control, and the intricate pressures of growing up under a spotlight few could imagine. King's decision to break silence has transformed private family tension into a very public reckoning. What was once hidden behind closed doors is now open to interpretation, debate, and relentless analysis. The situation highlights layers of generational dynamics as well. King represents a younger voice, a new perspective, and the tension of carving out individuality in the shadow of a parent whose influence is immense. T.I. embodies authority, experience, and decades of carefully curated public perception. The clash between these forces, the desire to assert independence versus the weight of expectation, has become central to the unfolding drama. And as this narrative spreads online, the conversation has grown beyond the Harris family itself. Fans, critics, and observers are analyzing every word, every gesture, and every historical context they can find, trying to decode what this moment truly means for family, fame, and the culture at large. The internet has responded with equal measures of shock, support, and debate. Some defend T.I., framing King's outspokenness as typical youthful rebellion or momentary emotional reaction. Others rally behind King, praising his courage for speaking truth to power, breaking the silence that has constrained him for years. But the reaction is no longer just binary. It has evolved into something more nuanced, a discussion about generational trauma, parental influence, and the pressures of fame that affect families differently than the average household. What makes this chapter so compelling is that the story feels unfinished. Every time a new clip surfaces, every subtle online post or insider hint, it has the potential to shift public perception again. King's refusal to retreat has permanently altered the conversation, forcing audiences to confront the realities of authority, image, and honesty within hip-hop culture. T.I.'s silence, 50 Cent's presence in the background, and unnamed voices waiting in the wings all contribute to a sense that the next move could dramatically change everything once more. At its core, this is a story about more than just a father and a son. It's about power, legacy, and the cost of visibility in an industry where personal and public life collide. The Harris family dynamic has entered a new, uncertain chapter, one that challenges assumptions, provokes debate, and holds the audience's attention with relentless intensity. And while no one can predict the next move, one thing is certain: this story is far from finished. If anything, it may only be just beginning. T.I.'s public persona has always emphasized strength, discipline, and leadership. He has positioned himself as a mentor and voice of reason in hip-hop. King's revelations directly challenge that narrative, forcing fans and observers to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the more complicated picture being painted. The contrast is jarring for many, which explains why the story continues to dominate timelines. Meanwhile, 50 Cent's subtle but pointed reactions keep the situation alive. His posts, never naming names but clearly timed and worded to stir conversation, remind everyone that this is no longer a purely private matter. When someone with 50 Cent's history of turning personal conflicts into public spectacles gets involved, the stakes rise dramatically. His single line about "family business always come out eventually" landed like a warning shot, suggesting he sees this as part of a larger pattern rather than an isolated incident. The most unsettling aspect is the growing sense that King hasn't said everything yet. Insiders claim there are deeper details that don't just involve family dynamics but could pull in other people, other situations, and other moments that were never meant to be connected publicly. The leaked message, "I haven't even said the real reason yet," only heightened that anxiety. If King decides to go further, the situation could explode in directions nobody is prepared for.